We are now live.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome to a virtual petition here in London Borough of Hillingdon. This is the first virtual meeting I've held for my petitions. Before the lockdown, we were able to socially distance in Committee Room 5 and have one petitioner in. But obviously, following government guidelines, we have taken the decision to make these virtual. This will also be broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Keith Burrows. I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning and Transportation, and I'm the Chairman of this meeting. I do have some very important online housekeeping though before we start our meeting. Please ensure that if you have a mobile phone around you, they're actually on silent. Also, please keep your microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. Only one person should speak at a time, and I, as chairman, will call those to speak and keep an eye on the room through my gallery view of those indicating. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, for example, lost connection, I will continue the meeting. We now have to do an attendance roll call before we actually move on. I will first start with councillors, and I will ask you to indicate you are present when I call your name, and also declare any interest you may have in this matter. So I will start with Councillor Ahmed Walana. I don't believe he is attending. Councillor Simon Arnold.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm in attendance representing the 3 ward councillors, and apart from being a ward councillor, I have no other interests.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. And I know that Councillor DeVille is not present because you are, as you've already said, Councillor Arnold, representing all 3. We also have officers present, and I will ask them to indicate they're in the meeting, starting with Steve Austin.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Neil Fraser.
Present, Chairman.
And Ryan Dell.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. And also, I know you are there, Mr. Wood, but can you please also indicate that you are present? We know your microphone's working.
I am indeed in attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. The format of the meeting is the lead petitioner, so that would be you, Mr. Wood, in this case, has 5 minutes to state why you've brought the petition this evening. I will then move to Councillor Arnold to add anything that he wishes to add. I will then move to the report. I have a report that has been already drafted by officers, and it does have recommendations. Those recommendations do not become substantive until I actually move them. So I can change them or I can add to them. Throughout you speaking, Mr. Wood, I will be making notes, taking on board what you tell me, so that I can ensure that what you are telling me is going to be covered by officers' recommendations. So as Ryan's already indicated, when you have 1 minute left, Mr. Wood, he will hold his hand up so you know you have 1 minute before you need to wrap up your delivery. And for you, Councillor Arnold, you have 3 minutes to add to what your resident has actually stated in the petition. So, Mr. Wood, it is over to you for your 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. Most of what I'm about to say is covered in the original petition, but it doesn't hurt to go back over it. I'm a resident of 164 Whitethorn Avenue, which is at the Horton Road end of the road. Unfortunately, the situation we have is that we are the nearest non-residents parking area to West Drayton station, the nearest of the Horton Road business parks, and yet we're the only parking in the area without resident parking. We feel we should note that between 2018 and 2019, residents of Whitethorn Avenue were originally balloted about a parking scheme. We received notification that the majority of the residents indicated they were in support of the scheme. We then received detailed plans and were informed that the statutory consultation period would last until the 31st of July. Unfortunately, we then heard nothing further, and thus we felt obliged to start this process over again in the hopes that we were given a parking scheme as indicated by the council at that time. It is respectfully requested that Hillingdon Council consider allocating a designated residents parking area on street and in the parking bays for the residents of Whitethorn Avenue at the end adjacent to Horton Road, which would require resident parking permits on weekdays, preferably Monday to Friday from 9 AM to 6 PM. Furthermore, each household within the designated areas of Whitethorn Avenue at the Horton Road end should be entitled to parking permits for each member of the household who legally holds a UK driver's licence and has a car that requires parking near their home. The designated areas that we are highlighting, as I've previously said, are towards the Horton Road end of Whitethorn Avenue, as we have far more of a problem with this issue than the actual centre part of the estate. Here's a summary of the reasons for the request as follows. The residents of Whitethorn Avenue have been deprived of parking their cars near their homes for many years now during normal working hours. The parking situation outside our property is completely unacceptable for us residents, and we are forced to park several hundred yards further into the estate. Some of the residents even feel obliged to park on the grass verges outside of their homes, thereby breaking parking regulations and making the road look extremely untidy. Specifically, the staff of John Guest, located at the end of Horton Road, on Horton Road adjacent to Whitethorn Avenue, should I say, park their cars daily on Whitethorn Avenue, and there's 2 shifts, so that's basically all day long, despite the fact that we have made several complaints to their management, which have been addressed in the past, but then they slowly fall back into old habits, unfortunately. Some of the other problems we have include local car workshops parking their cars that they are working on outside our homes and then getting lifts back to the workshops. This happens almost on a daily basis. The large amount of new businesses and industrial buildings that have been built along Horton Road have only exacerbated the problem. The staff from Bury BMW also feel the need to park their cars on the bays in Whitethorn Avenue during the week, depriving the residents of Whitethorn Avenue, Horton Road end again, of parking in the bays near their homes. There are also issues where mechanics around the area park their customers' cars in the bays on Whitethorn Avenue and leave them there for long periods of time. There's also been an influx in the last few years of people travelling to various terminals at Heathrow Airport, and then they have proceeded to leave their cars on Whitethorn Avenue in the parking areas, either to get a bus or a minicab into the airport, and so the cars are there for weeks, sometimes months at a time. Once again, prohibiting residents of the road from parking near their homes. More recently, we had a situation during lockdown where a local minibus company, who were clearly not very busy at the time, felt the need to park over half a dozen of their minibuses along our road. Some of the minibuses were so large, they were protruding out of the parking bays into the road, causing a risk to oncoming cars and blocking drivers' peripheral vision. We've also been deprived of the ability to use our garages because there's simply not enough room on the first part of Aspen Close, which is at the back of our house, for cars to park opposite the garage doors and for us to manoeuvre out the garages. I don't know if this is covered understanding the problem with Aspen Close being not under the jurisdiction of the council. Ideally, yellow lines in that area if we can. More recently, there's a new industrial business park that's, I can't think what it's called, Prologis, which has been being built further along Horton Road towards Stockley Park, and the contractors working on that every morning park their cars out the front, and then they use a minibus as a shuttle van to take them into work, and then they reappear at the end of their shifts 8.5 hours later. So, I mean, this morning I had a look out there at 7:30. Of the 13 bays outside my house, 7 were occupied. By 8:30, they were full, and the 2 spaces opposite were also full. So, and that's with the people that live here haven't gone to work, those that do work day shifts. The situation isn't going to get better as we see it. Indeed, it has worsened significantly in the last year. Please help us by taking the necessary action if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood, and you were bang on 5 minutes. Well done. Some councillors struggle with that one. Okay, Councillor Arnold, you've heard what your residents got to say. It's now over to you as ward councillor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As us as the 3 ward councillors and me here tonight in representing all 3, we're fully in support of the petitioner. Everything that Mr. Wood has said is very true. We've found, as particularly in the whole surrounding area, more and more people are using it to park, be it to travel to the hospital, be it to travel on public transport, particularly West Drayton station, and the problem of people parking before they go to Heathrow. As Mr. Wood said, a lot of new businesses around that area are also using that space. I know we visited this about 18 months ago, and we would very much like to see a parking management scheme in this area. And I think, as you're aware, Chairman, this is becoming a larger problem around the whole area, which is why we've had several of these petitions over the last few months. as parking gets pushed from one area, it tends to go on to the other, but this is a particularly difficult area for parking. So all I can say in conclusion is we're in full support of the petitioners.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Can I just ask Steve Austin to just clarify the reason behind we didn't do anything before was due to the lack of responses received to the previous consultation, is that right?
Yes, Councillor. As Mr. Wood suggested, we undertook an informal consultation where there was a general view that residents would like to, look at options that we could provide for a formal parking management scheme. There are challenges with the layout of the road, in that there are some areas offset from the main carriageway, which presumably at one point were just for parking. And over the years, some of these have been eroded where people have had drop curbs put in and driveways onto their off-street parking areas. So those areas are unusual in respect that there are some areas within these bays that you could use for parking, and then there are drop curbs with them as well. So it does present some challenges, just the road layout. And the detailed design that we came up with, which we presented to residents in July 2019, the results that we had back were pretty disappointing. And on the whole, I think people felt that the design really was going to work for them. And Mr. Wood's suggestions about allowing everybody to have a permit if they have a vehicle within the household, there is only so much curbside space in the road, and I'm not sure that if we sort of adopt that approach that we will meet the needs or the expectations of the residents. But yeah, what we had from the original consultation, the formal consultation, was fairly disappointing in terms of responses, but that's not to say that we can't revisit it.
Thank you, Steve. And another point I want you to just clarify, Aspen Close is not an adopted road, is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor Burrows.
So therefore, we generally don't really have much jurisdiction over an unadopted road to put parking or yellow lines within it, do we?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you. So Aspen Close basically could find themselves not being part of any scheme, is that right?
That's correct. I mean, we do have powers under the Road Traffic Regulation Act to impose or implement parking on the adopted highway, but Aspen Close is private. So unless we can establish who owns it and the status of it, I mean, at the moment, we wouldn't really look at it.
Thank you. I just wanted clarity and clarification on that. But Providence Road and Whitethorn Avenue, which are part of this petition, we could look at both of those, but unfortunately Aspen Close we couldn't include in any design or consultation.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we looked at Providence and Whitethorn below. We have a detailed design ready, which we've shared with residents before, so it's probably something we could revisit.
Okay, thank you.
Not Aspen Close, I'm afraid.
No. Okay, thank you, Steve, for clarification. Okay, the recommendations within the officer's report, I don't know if everybody's seen them, but I will read them out. Recommendation 1 is that the Cabinet Member for Planning and Transportation meets with petitioners, albeit virtually, and listens to their request for the introduction of a residence permit parking scheme for Whitethorn Avenue, Aspen Close and Providence Road, West Drayton. I've heard the requests for that, but obviously we have heard now Aspen Close we cannot do anything about, so it would be Whitethorn Avenue and Providence Road that we would be looking at. Recommendation 2 is subject to the outcome of the above. Ask officers to add the request to the Council's extensive parking management scheme programme for further informal consultation, and any other roads in the area which ward councillors may deem appropriate. Unfortunately, Councillor Arnold, Aspen closes out, so please don't ask me to put that one back in. Other roads in that area, so if we were to take Whitethorn Avenue as a whole, because it's like that big horseshoe, comes off U Avenue, goes right the way around, and comes out literally opposite John Guest. Hence Mr. Wood's comment about John Guest parking in there, because literally they park and walk over the road. And we got Providence Road there as well as part of it. So, Councillor Arnold, what's your view on?
Chairman, I can see us being, even if we were to be able to do Whitethorn Avenue and Providence Road, I can see us being back at some point in the future, because that traffic will be pushed onto Edgar, Maple, Cedar Avenue and Arcadia and Lilac Place. And as they're in the middle of the horseshoe and most of the surrounding roads already have a parking management scheme, I don't know if officers would be able to look into seeing possibly adding those to the same scheme.
Steve, thoughts?
Yes, certainly, Councillor, that we could look at the area as a whole. In some respects, we've already had a previous consultation with the residents of Providence and Whitethorn, hence that's why we took it through to a statutory consultation. So with this petition, we almost have a mandate, if you like, from the residents of those at Whitethorn and Providence already. I mean, we could do an informal consultation with Edgar, Maple, Cedar and Acacia. Whether we run the two at the same time or separately is perhaps a conversation we need to have, Councillor Burrows, at our Monday meeting.
I mean, as long as one doesn't delay the other, then we could do the other one as a separate scheme, if that's what you're suggesting, Steve.
Yes, that's pretty much what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Thank you, Steve. I'm just very quickly jotting down a third recommendation so that we actually have it recorded. What Councillor Arnold requested gets included as part of the wider consultation or otherwise. Okay, so definitely we will put this in the programme. We'll definitely put it into a programme, and I'll ask officers to do that. But I've put a recommendation 3 so that it is minuted, Councillor Arnold. At Councillor's request, this will be expanded to an informal consultation, either as part of the Whitethorn Avenue or Providence Road consultation, or at a date after, to be agreed with Cabinet Member, and the roads to be included are Edgar, Maple Avenue, Cedar Avenue, Acacia Avenue, Lilac Place. So if we think we're at a point where we can do Providence and Whitethorn reasonably quickly, my view as Cabinet Member would be I would rather do that than hold that element up and then look at the other as another addition once we've got that formal consultation out of the way and in place. Is that agreed? Okay, so with those 3 recommendations, I thank you, Mr. Wood, for your input. I thank you, Councillor Arnold, for yours. Thank you, Steve, for yours from the Transport Division. And thank you, Ryan and Neil from Democratic Services. And I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, officers.
Good evening, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.